We are about a week away from the election on November 8th here in Missouri. So it is time for closing arguments, as they say. And Eric Schmitt, along with many of the Republicans in our state, have decided to go with crime.
Big city liberals in Missouri are pushing to defund our police.
Defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police.
Trudy Busch Valentine supports their radical anti-cop agenda. Trudy Busch Valentine is liberal on crime. Eric Schmitt fought their radical agenda and launched the Safer Streets Initiative to lock up criminals. Endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, Eric Schmitt is tough on crime.
So I thought, let's take a few minutes to explore this reasoning. Are Democrat cities in the state defunding the police, quote unquote? And has the 20-year reign of Republicans, and most recently the reign of Eric Schmitt as Attorney General, led to Missouri being a much safer state? Let's go. First, how we doing? Well, the answer, in short, is not so good. Missouri is one of the most dangerous states for violent crime in the entire country and has been for many years. In fact, if you look at per capita murder rate, Missouri ranks number 5. And, not for nothing, 8 of the top 10 states, as far as murder rate is concerned, are red states. Missouri's murder rate is more than double the national average. For reference, states like California, New York, and New Jersey are all below the national average. What a lot of people will say is that this is all because of blue cities in these red states, and specifically in Missouri. And, of course, when you start to pull that thread just a little bit, it kind of falls apart as an argument. First, blue states have blue cities. In fact, some of the biggest blue cities in the entire country. And then when you go down even one layer further, you understand that most cities happen to be run by Democrats. They're blue. There are some, though, that are run by Republicans. For example, Jacksonville in Florida, where the violent crime rate and murder rate are high. And Bakersfield in California, which, interestingly enough, that quote-unquote red city has a higher murder rate than both San Francisco and LA. So there isn't necessarily an easy correlation between whether or not a city is run by a Democrat or Republican, and suddenly they're magically going to have lower crime rates. One other little fun fact, if you remove St. Louis and Kansas City from the numbers here in Missouri, the state murder rate would still be higher than New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, to name a few. Let's also talk about the Safer Streets initiative that Eric Schmitt touts in his ad. Essentially, this was a partnership with the district attorney and Eric Schmitt's office. But they basically just hired more attorneys so they could get to a backlog of cases. Yes, it increased the number of convictions that they could point to, but it wasn't exactly doing something unbelievably innovative. It was just filling out the right amount of people needed to adequately do the job of the Attorney General's office. Now let's talk about my favorite topic, defund the police. Republicans here in our state, and Eric Schmitt specifically, love to point to Democrats in the cities in St. Louis and Kansas City and elsewhere as examples of Democrats that want to defund the police. Now, I will say that you have to concede, Cori Bush has specifically said that she supports a defund the police movement. But when they talk about defund the police in our state, they often point to 2 specific examples. So I just want to pull that thread as well a little bit so you have all of the information. So first, let's talk about Kansas City. Kansas City is required by state law to spend a minimum of 20% of their budget on the police department. Now, they made the decision that they were going to spend more than that in this past budget, nearly 25%. However, Quinton Lucas, the mayor in Kansas City, said that he wanted to try to take the money above that 4% and reallocate it within the police budget to community outreach programs. Now, bear in mind, these are community outreach programs in the police budget. They wouldn't be pulling that money from the police budget. They would just be directing it toward community outreach. Now, this set off a firestorm. In fact, it resulted in the state legislature passing this amendment that said that Kansas City should have to spend a minimum of 25% of their city budget on the police department and have no control over it. At the end of the day, it didn't happen, right? The additional 5% is still spent basically directed by the Police Budget Commission, not by the mayor. So no defund the police actually happened, and even the one that was quote-unquote attempted is a little bit more nuanced than the way that it's portrayed. St. Louis is a slightly different topic. So Tishaura Jones, the mayor in St. Louis, did remove about 2% of the proposed $171 million police budget from this year. That ends up being about $4 million. But if you look at the police budget just from 2020, that was $154 million. So by any stretch, the budget has actually increased. So not exactly defunding by the way that I understand it there. And the $4 million wasn't removing any current police officers. It didn't change anything related to police on the streets today. What it did is she identified 98 vacant positions that had been vacant for a long period of time with the police commissioner in St. Louis as ones that they could live without. So they reallocated the $4 million earmarked for those 98 positions toward primarily victims support and to combat homelessness. Now, if you want to talk about policies or laws that have been passed that prevent the police from being able to actually do their job, let's talk about the Second Amendment Preservation Act. This was passed by the Missouri legislature, signed by Mike Parson, and what it said is that the police in Missouri cannot work with the federal government to enforce any federal gun laws. If they do, they are fined $50,000 per incident. Now, taking $50,000 from the police department if they simply try to enforce a law, I'm not sure what you would call that, but it doesn't really feel like funding. Then we have laws in Missouri that don't have to do with funding, but specifically prevent police from doing much related to firearms and safety of the public. Here's the most recent example. Just a week ago, there was a shooting in St. Louis at a school, and the police had 4 run-ins with the shooter prior to the shooting, but they couldn't do anything, even when his parents specifically asked the police to remove his guns because they were fearful for their safety and other people's safety. Under Missouri law, the police couldn't stop him. They couldn't take his guns. Even if they saw him walking to the school with his long guns and all the ammo, he had over 100 rounds. They couldn't stop him under Missouri law until he officially broke a law they could clearly prove, which he didn't do until he started shooting at that school. Now, don't get me wrong. The police responded unbelievably quickly. They did everything they were supposed to do. But under Missouri law, they were restricted in what they could do. That's what I got. Sorry for the long video. It's no secret that I have an opinion on this matter, but I try my best to give you the facts as I see them and let you make your own opinion. Personally, I feel that this whole argument that Republicans are always better on crime and that Democrats are actively trying to defund the police in this scary way that takes police off of the streets and makes you less safe is dishonest at best. And I think that the laws that do actively prevent police from doing their jobs are things like the Second Amendment Preservation Act that was passed here in Missouri. But what do I know?